Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Broadway Jets YouTube channel. You'll know me from Twitter as NYJ Mike. I'm joined as always by the master of receipts, NYJ Matt. And Matt, very exciting stuff. We're going to start talking about the draft. The Jets have the 13th pick, and there's a lot of things that they could do. There's a lot of flexibility. Joe Douglas has this roster in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, you're the 13th pick. They can go a lot of different ways. I think we'll start off by taking out the positions we know the Jets are not going to take. But before we get there, don't forget to hit subscribe. If you like what we're doing on Twitter, we're not going to ask you to be like a super follower or tips. Like a lot of people on Twitter ask for money. All we ask is that you hit subscribe on YouTube and enjoy the content that we put out. But
It
outside of
doesn't
that,
money. What are they going to tip us? It's weird.
yeah, no, people on Twitter, they have like the tips thing and they have
Really?
like they just consistently put out bad takes and then they ask for super followers and tips. I think it's very bizarre.
I'm not a stripper or a waiter.
Fact.
This is we're talking about the Jets. Anyway, so one of my favorite things about Joe Douglas, and there are some, you can look at things from one or two ways, but one of my favorite things is that his roster construction left the Jets in a spot where the biggest positions of need outside of quarterback, and he did invest in the quarterback, but outside of quarterback, I think are the least valuable positions in football, which is a good thing.
I agree. So think of those, you're thinking of safety, you're thinking of linebacker. Um,
Right.
Now you invest in O line, and we'll get to it a bit, but take out the positions we know we're not drafting. So at 13, I think we all can agree that the veteran quarterback is likely the move, and that unless a Will Levis or CJ Stroud fall to 13, which is very unlikely, which is a good thing for the Jets because that means three teams in front of you are going to take quarterbacks that the Jets hopefully will have a veteran there. Look at like a Derek Carr, maybe even Aaron Rodgers. Stuff like that can happen where I don't think the Jets go quarterback at 13 at all. We know Levis's arm strength. We know what CJ Stroud can do, but I think they're both going to be gone in the top 10, and the Jets can take a different position. Would you agree that quarterback is kind of off the table right now at 13, given that we get a
Yeah,
veteran?
the Jets are looking to win next year. Joe Douglas and Salah are probably going to be fired if they don't make the playoffs. You can't take a chance and draft a quarterback at 13. If they just had like the first overall pick and there's some generational guy, sure, because obviously quarterback is a need, but I'm not, spending a ton of assets to move up in the draft. I'm not taking a chance on a flyer guy at 13. We don't have time for a project. Defense is too good. The roster is filled with young guys who are on their rookie deals. You got to win now. And I agree with you. It's going to be a veteran guy. I'm happy
Yep,
about that.
agreed. And then two other
Yeah.
spots on offense that I think there's one clear guy that stands above the rest. If the Jets won't take at 13, is looking at running back B. John Robinson at Texas, a true workhorse. He's going to go to a team. A lot of teams have him mocked end of the late 20s, so he'll go to a team like maybe Buffalo that could use one more element to take him over the top. But given that Brees Hall, like a Carter investment, I think the Jets stay away from running back at 13, of course, and then even tight end. They've invested a lot in tight end in free agency and not wasted, but at this point, used a pick on Jeremy Ruckert in the top 4 rounds. So you're going to say, hey, Michael Mayer, Notre Dame, great prospect. Probably not the pick at 13.
Yeah, I mean the only thing is if the Jets want to get funky and you can cut Uzama, you can cut Conklin, you can move some of those guys around. I thought Conklin was fine. I know there were some 50-50 balls he didn't win, a couple drops. He did fumble early in the season a couple of times. One of them the Jets lost. And Uzama did what he was asked to do. Definitely a good locker room guy, terrific blocker. They used him more as a receiver as the season went on. So if they want to run it back with Conklin, Ruckert, and Uzama, I'm fine with that. And there were some flashes in that Week 18 game. We got to see Ruckert a little bit. I know Nania was posting some videos of Ruckert flying around the line of scrimmage, throwing some blocks. If they just really believe in one of these tight ends, the Notre Dame guy or one of the Georgia guys, and they want to take a shot, I don't hate it, but this is what we're talking about. These tight end is another one of those positions. It's not a cornerback, a left tackle, a quarterback that are the a pass rusher that are premier positions in football. So it's tough to invest the 13th pick in that. But if the Jets really think there's a game changer, maybe I agree with you. I don't think they're going to go that way.
Yeah, so Darnell Washington out of Georgia will be more of a late one guy. Brock Bowers needs one more year in college, and he would be a guy at 13 that I'd be very interested in. Michael Mayer is that player that if they really wanted to go that route, that's who they would take. But I think we can safely at this point cross off quarterback, running back, and tight end being that 13th overall pick, leaving us on the offensive side of the ball with offensive line and wide receiver. And we'll get back to that, but we'll leave that there as possibilities moving in to the 2023 draft. So let's pick it up on defense. Like cornerback can't be the pick at 13. What they invested
No
in Sauce
shot.
Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, some depth guys there. I think we can all agree cornerback off the table at 13.
The Jets have, I think, the best cornerback trio tandem in football. Obviously, Sauce with one of the best rookie seasons of any player in the history of sports, which is not a hyperbole, which is really cool. DJ Reed should have had some All Pro consideration. But probably you just can't play the position much better than they both did. Um, Holding great duos to 30, 40 yards. Sauce just not letting up anything. Michael Carter, even if he got beat, it's the guy, is blanketed over people. So you're not going to take a corner. And then what about the defensive line? The Jets have a lot of guys. There's a lot of depth, but some moving pieces. Carl Lawson could be a cut candidate, a restructure candidate. People want Bryce Huff to play. Obviously, you're going to have to go out and re-sign Quinn Williams. Some interesting stuff pass rush wise.
Yeah, defensive line, a guy like Jalen Carter likely going to go top 5. People don't think he's going to fall past Arizona at 3. So Jalen Carter from Georgia probably off the board, and then Miles Murphy, another guy from Clemson, going to be a top 10 pick likely. But that could be a scenario if they want to go best player available. If he falls at 13, maybe they jump at a Miles Murphy. Also the D line and looking across edge, I know Brian Brees they've said can do a little bit of both. I think he lines up more of a D line. And then edge, Will Anderson gone, Tyree Wilson at Texas Tech around that area. But Mike, of how good they played at defense, and you have young guys like Jermaine Johnson, and Bryce Huff filling into the void, I don't think that they go any D line at 13 in this draft.
The only thing you could do is take a big run stuffing defensive tackle kind of guy, because that I think is a somewhat of a glaring hole. I know the Jets like to play that 4 wide front where they kind of give up the middle of the field, which is interesting. Teams took advantage a little bit at the end of the year, running the ball straight up the middle against the Jets. But that's the one thing. Once you lost Foley Fatukasi last year, um, things kind of went downhill in terms of just straight run defense. The Jets were still in the top half of the league in run defense this year. And like you said, they had a terrific year defensively. So they wanted to go that route. But this is what I mean with Joe Douglas, run stuffing defensive tackle, not one of the best, not one of the most sought after positions in football. And the Jets, after years of having no pass rushers, now we have to choose between which pass rushers we like. And these are all effective guys. So it's a good situation in that sense.
Yeah, I think Miles Murphy out of Clemson, if he were to fall to 13, fills that void of a 6'5, 270, 280 guy that could eat up blocks and has shown he can rush the passer at Clemson. So if we go that route and we say, okay, let's put D line right now in the back burner, the true areas that you could see the Jets drafting are O line, wide receiver, linebacker, and safety. Any
Right.
disagreement face value with those 4 positions?
No, and O line's interesting because the glaring needs probably an interior offensive lineman where you don't know the future of Connor McGovern. If there's a good center available, you can make a move that way. And that's the beauty of AVT. You can really play him. It looks like wherever dude is playing at a super high level across the entire offensive line. So if you just want to take a tackle, you could do that. If you want to take an interior offensive lineman, you could just move AVT elsewhere to tackle and then plug in another guy. Nate Herbig was pretty good for the Jets this year, but faded down the stretch. Laken Tomlinson was by all accounts disappointing. So um, I don't know if the Jets are going to cut him, but I agree. I think offensive line makes the most sense on the offensive side of the ball. But Matt, I don't know what your thoughts on Elijah Moore are going into next year. If you think he could be a starter or slot guy or some other kind of variation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so wide receiver is an area where Elijah Moore is a key X factor in what they do in the offseason. The way I want to rule it out though is I think they have to go offense at 13. And then you look back and say, okay, well, linebacker and safety, even though they were a top 5 defense, I think they graded out as number 1 defense from PFF. Look at linebacker. There's no true guy like a CJ Mosley was coming out of college, or you look at Micah Parsons, these like random guys that will go like from 8 to 16. There's no linebacker that stands out. And people like Noah Sewell from Oregon, Penei Sewell's brother, that was an opportunity that people thought he can go mid first. He slid down a bit after his sophomore year at Oregon. Henry To'oTo'o has been in Alabama forever. One of those guys that is like a true 4-year senior. Those guys usually go second round, third round, where you're like, okay, you played under Saban for 4 years. You know how to play the offense or play the defense. So Trenton Simpson, another guy. I don't think the Jets go linebacker, and I don't think they go safety either. I think they're comfortable right now with who they have at linebacker with Mosley, Quincy, and if they can, bring back Quan, that trio, I think they're okay with, and maybe getting a guy day 2 or day 3 to learn behind them. Now at safety, you look at Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M. People have him potentially a top 15 pick, and then a guy who can play both safety and corner in Brian Branch, who was at Alabama. So those two guys at 13, are you thinking, okay, maybe a guy that can cover, not only cover, but can hit a running back, play good deep coverage? I don't think they go that route again. So I agree with you. Offensive side of the ball is probably the play, but just throwing out some names that as we get closer to the draft of Brian Branch, Antonio Johnson, those type of guys that are more hybrid safety corners could really make that secondary a top 1-2 secondary in the NFL.
I'll tell you what, too. I was impressed with Tony Adams over the last couple of games. He came in and was when Marcus Joyner got hurt and was zipping around the field, noticeably fast just from the eye test. So that's an interesting guy. And he did make the Jets opening day roster last year, which we were surprised about. When the Jets had a couple guys that they cut right at the end of training camp. I think 7 players the Jets cut last year got signed by other teams. So including Jason Pinnock and some other guys in the secondary. So Tony Adams was impressive. Maybe they could pair him. I'm happy with Jordan Whitehead to be our strong safety for $7 million. The Jets could use one of these really high prospects to do some drugs on camera, or we could try to plant. We could plant weed or something. Take a trip down to Alabama, but I agree with you. I think the Jets are going to go offense.
And that's the cool thing, Mike, because if 3 quarterbacks go and a very strong corner class where 2 guys that keep flying up the boards, Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois, Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon, both unbelievable, like crazy sauce-like numbers when they were playing with not giving up touchdown, all these stats about them. Cam Smith out of South Carolina, all 3 of those guys could go in the top 12. And then you add in 3 quarterbacks and a guy like Will Anderson, Jalen Carter. Those are 8 guys out. And that gives you 5 teams in front of you that maybe they take an offensive lineman, but maybe they go receiver. Maybe they go a defensive player that isn't on our radar, that we don't have to worry about that. So I want to go O-line, and here's my take of why we shouldn't take a receiver. Is it a very strong possibility? If they cut Corey Davis, maybe. You think Garrett Wilson will be your 1, but Elijah Moore is consistently putting up 2 catches for 17-yard games. Can you rely on him for being the 2? And the receivers, only 3 are going to be a real talking point at 13. Mike, you're looking at Jordan Addison out of USC, who was playing with the best player in college football this year. Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State sat out basically the entire year, but you saw what he did against Utah in the Rose Bowl a year and a half ago, scoring 4 times and having 350 yards receiving. And then Quentin Johnson out of TCU, who was flying up draft boards, and in the national championship has 1 catch for 3 yards.
1 catch. Yeah.
So if you really want to pair Garrett Wilson, you can bring in his Ohio State colleague and say, okay, these 2 lit it up in college football. Let's bring them together. More, could play slot, could play outside. But Quentin Johnson is that more red zone, big body, 6'4", 215 guy that could pair very nicely with a Moore and a Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, and look, Garrett Wilson, like you said, is for sure the number 1 guy, 1,000 yards, 80 catches, and there's just so much room for more. And then Elijah Moore is such an enigma because it's a very similar thing. We had Denzel Mims' rookie year. Looked like he was going to be a terrific player. Put up 500 plus yards. Weird quarterback situation. You figure year 2, you really pop. Complete opposite. Same thing with Elijah Moore. And I still am very disgusted about his comments with Mike LaFleur. I don't know the whole, Elijah Moore was right. You don't tell your offensive coordinator to go fuck yourself after you are 10 years the Jets hadn't won 3 games in a row. You're on a 3-game winning streak. You go to Lambeau Field and beat the Packers in a windy, rainy game, and then you tell your offensive coordinator to go fuck yourself and cause a whole problem and demand a trade. So I don't trust the guy. I'm very disappointed with his play last year as well. It didn't look like he was open every second. There were sometimes his rookie year where there were some clips. Maybe he got missed on a couple of deep balls, but it felt like he was in some sticky coverage this year, and I'm uncomfortable with him going into the season as a number two. Whereas going into this season, I was comfortable with him being the number two. He's got to show me a lot, and it makes cutting Corey Davis, which we thought was going to be the move after this season. It makes that very murky. I don't know if the Jets should do that. It's going to be hard to find someone to replace Corey Davis for 11 million bucks. It's a very weak wide receiver market. You're looking at a guy like Mecole Hardman or Alan Lazard to replace him. Corey's already a good locker room dude, good blocker. I think he's a better receiver statistically than he was this year. So if the Jets want to go receiver at 13, I'm okay with that. I think that makes sense, and it really, especially if they bring in a veteran quarterback, now you're looking at a ton of weapons.
Yep. And if we're looking at the reasonability factor, the Jets had a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense. So you need to keep adding and throwing pieces at that offense, even though you've already invested heavily in the past few drafts in the first 2 rounds in offense. Now, the way we did that was we said, okay, here's what we're not going to draft. Here's what we could draft. Here's what we're likely going to draft. And we're saving the best for last, where you take O-line and you have Dwayne Brown likely coming back. You have AVT getting healthy. You have Mekhi Becton getting healthy. You have Lakin Tomlinson that you gave money to that you could restructure. We'll figure that out. McGovern, you got to re-sign because you had a top 15 year at center, which you can totally move forward with. Max Mitchell, a guy who's showing. But the most important thing that they can do at 13 is get a dude in here that's versatile. And the main guys that you'll see are Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, Broderick Jones out of Georgia, and then Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State. Now, all of these guys, I think you'll hear from, I listen to a ton of podcasts. They'll tell you everything under the sun. It sounds like these 3 guys are very much in the versatile camp of Tristan Wirfs. Maybe not the prospect that he was, but if you put him at guard, he can be great. If you put him at tackle, he can develop into a really good player.
He was the 13th pick.
Right. So you think about that piece of it and say, give me everyone healthy. Maybe the best setup you can go is Dwayne Brown at left tackle, throw Mekhi at right tackle, AVT is left guard, or they cut Tomlinson and use that money elsewhere. You draft Paris Johnson Jr., who could play right guard. If Dwayne Brown's not healthy, guess what? Mekhi Becton left tackle, AVT right tackle, Tomlinson there at left guard, Paris Johnson at right guard. Like, this stuff is very important where we're not taking a guy like maybe Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, who is a true tackle. I don't think he is ever projected to be a guard, and he's more of a mid to late one, whereas Paris Johnson Jr. and Peter Skoronski, they're top 15 picks, where if they can get either come in day one and be a starting tackle, they can be a starting guard who's really great or could play tackle given an injury. That is, I think, the best thing that you can do. You see how important offensive line is throughout the NFL. Look at the Eagles last night. Just move the ball down the field consistently with a great offensive line. That's something that I need for this team. It was a strength going into this year. With injuries, it became a weakness.
Yeah, and Joe Douglas values offensive line and defensive line probably more than any other GM in football, which I appreciate. And like you said, if the Jets are able to have 3 recent first round picks on the offensive line in Becton, whoever they draft now, and AVT, plus all the other guys you named, and there's the flexibility there again, where you can bring back McGovern, you can not cut Lakin Tomlinson, you can use Max Mitchell at some point, and then you have some real good depth. And that's not even including Dwayne Brown, who was a Pro Bowler the year before this. So, and Dwayne Brown, by the way, what a hell of a tough guy to tear his shoulder at 37, and he could just walk away and retire, but he came back and played 12 games for the Jets. So have to appreciate that. But yeah, look, it's a very good, enticing situation if you are a veteran quarterback. They just don't have to trade the 13th pick to bring a quarterback here. You're going to have another sick monster maniac stud that you're going to plug in and play. And hopefully it is, I agree with you, one of these offensive linemen. And then if you're Derek Carr, you say, oh my God, there's 3 young stud offensive linemen. You have Breece Hall, who probably would have been the offensive rookie of the year. Garrett Wilson, who could be the offensive rookie of the year. A couple of good tight ends, and a terrific top 5 young defense. So that's the same thing if I'm an offensive coordinator, where the Jets have the assets to go out and bring in a veteran quarterback as well. All of those things together, it's a really, really good situation, I think.
I agree. I agree. So in my order, I'm going offensive line as the number one need. Next, I would go receiver. Then you could talk me into a safety who can not only cover but kill a running back, really get after it. Linebacker, I'm intrigued. Everything else, you'd really need to have someone fall and get a stud, either run blocker, edge, maybe that tight end. Those are those conversations. If really we lose like the top three offensive linemen, maybe not as many quarterbacks go, you could talk me into having one of those positions. But right now, I'm very much set on having that offensive lineman. Or if you want to get crazy, take a receiver. At that point, you're really saying we don't trust Elijah Moore as much as we drafted him, and Denzel Mims is likely a goner.
Yeah, and just I can't stop thinking about that run stuffing defensive tackle at some point. Doesn't have to be the 13th pick, but they have to upgrade. Another area the Jets were horrific was third and short, fourth and short. We've talked about this on our podcast and on some of these videos before. It felt like literally every single time the opposing team QB sneaked or did a short run up the middle on one of those situations, it would be like Nathan Shepard versus three offensive linemen, and it's an automatic first down. And then the one time the Jets really stacked the box on one of those situations was the Detroit game, and of course Jared Goff threw a 50-yard touchdown to the tight end Brock Wright. So and I can't look at that anymore. I hope the Jets are better in short yardage and more rugged against the run in 2023.
Yep, completely agree, Mike. Well, we'll have a lot more talk over free agency, how that plays out. That does impact who we're going to take at 13. Maybe a crazy trade for a veteran quarterback that would utilize 13 that we would be fine for, given they can bring in an Aaron Rodgers or Lamar Jackson. Mike, any other parting words? We're going to talk about quarterback very, very soon in an upcoming video. But in terms of right now, looking at 13, anything on your mind?
I would do unspeakable things for the Jets to include the 13th pick in a package for Aaron Rodgers. Figure it out. Figure out the money aspect. It can be done. Do it. The back-to-back NFL MVP coming into this season with all the weapons that we just mentioned. You won't have an extra offensive lineman at 13, but that's fine. And a top five defense. Good luck to the NFL.
I love it. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Again, if you made this far, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll be back.
All right, buddy. Don't tip us. We're not strippers.
Yeah.